Thank you. Just a couple of comments before we get started. I wanted to just mention that New St. Andrews College is in its 20th year, and we now are enjoying students from 35 states, 7 foreign countries, 20 different Christian denominations. We are small in part because we are a limited enrollment institution. We try to limit enrollment between 50 and 60 new students each year so that we have close interaction and small classes, good mentorship that way. So we are delighted to be enjoying this 20th year and having a great year to start off this 20th anniversary. I'm going to introduce the students who are going to be our inquisitors, our panelists, and I'll let them take over from there. But Santiago Pliego is from Mexico City. He's currently a junior. He has worked in multiple countries and knows multiple languages as a part of that, and has worked in insurance and surety bond markets. He's been here now 3 years and was one of the gentlemen you might have seen if you saw pictures of the pumpkin rugby tournament out there on the field. Maddie Schlect is from Moscow and is in her sophomore year. She's a past member of the Idaho State Championship mock trial team and served on that team for 4 years in a row as a student at Logos High School. Stephen Grammer is from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and is currently a junior. He is a past participant in the National Christian Forensics and Communication Association speech and debate competitions. Laura Russel is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She is completing her senior year. She's competing too, but has begun the graduate program as well as sort of a super senior. She has been a fellow and past participant in the Intercollegiate Studies Institute's honors program, which recognizes the top students in the country, and is also a past participant and competitor and a coach for the National Christian Forensics and Communications Association speech and debate competition. Our moderator for today's forum is Sam Paul. Sam is from Post Falls and is currently a junior here. He too has been involved in Christian Forensics and the Communication Association speech and debate competition and is very newly married. So please welcome our panelists, and I'll let them introduce the rest of the group. So, thank
you. Yes, in addition to the student panelists, we also have, I think, the prettiest timer around, my new wife, Susanna Paul. So she'll be timing. Okay, so welcome to this year's public forum. For the last 8 years, NSA has hosted a political forum to inform voters and raise public awareness of our city elections, and we're looking forward to this year being no exception. I'd like to introduce the format for this year's discussion. We will begin with the city council discussion, and each candidate will begin with 2 minutes of introductory remarks. Then each student panelist will have 8 minutes to ask questions of each of their respective city council candidates. Santiago will ask questions of Mr. Weber, Maddie will ask questions of Mr. Steed, and Stephen will be asking questions of Mr. Bettge. After this cross-examination portion, each candidate will have 3 minutes to give closing remarks. One city council candidate, Miss Rebecca Rod, was unable to attend today due to travel plans that she made before even entering the race. So Laura Russell will be reading a statement from Miss Rod so that each of the candidates have been represented. One final note on the city council election. There are 4 candidates and 3 city council seats. So be aware that the candidates aren't competing for the same seat, but in fact 3 out of the 4 of them will be elected to city council. That will conclude the city council portion. From there, we'll jump into the mayoral discussion. Mrs. Chaney and Mr. Lambert will each have 2 minutes for introductory remarks. Then Laura Russell will have 6 minutes to question each candidate. Then I, as moderator, will give 5 common questions to the candidates, and they'll have 2 minutes to answer each of my questions. And lastly, just like the city council race discussion, they'll have 3 minutes to close, and that will conclude today's forum. Okay, so to begin, we will look for introductory remarks from Mr. Bettge.
Okay. Okay, my eyes are on the timer down there. You know, I've spent a lot of time in this particular space, but always from that side looking up here at movies on the screen, which should say a little bit about how long I've been in this town. I first fetched up here in 1972, and after finishing my undergraduate degree at the University of Idaho, I departed for Africa and the Peace Corps, later riding commercial tuna boats in the tropical Pacific Ocean, making sure the fishermen weren't slaying flipper unnecessarily. After 3-4 month-long trips, I'd had enough of that, and I came back to Moscow with the first job I could lay hands on, which was with the USDA Western Wheat Quality Lab over in Pullman. I decided I liked living here in Moscow much more than I did going over to Pullman to live, and I've been here ever since 1980. So over those years, I've seen our politics and our economy wax, wane, come and go, but overall, I've been concerned that our political system has become increasingly polarized and non-functional. I would very much like to see more pragmatism and more moderation in our politics, where candidates and city councilmen can sit and absorb ideas and information from everybody who sees fit to come forth and work with the city, work with the council to have their say. I like my democracy messy. I like a lot of ideas coming in from a lot of different areas. And I like to be able to sit and consider each of those and come up with good, solid ideas that please as many people and provide a most solid foundation for the rest of our city. So that's where I'm after, and I would like to see Moscow diversify its economic base to keep some of the graduates of our various educational institutions in town. There's a vast dip in demographics in here between the ages of 30 and 45, the most productive years people have, and we need to bring some industry and some more economic vigor to town in order to keep folks like that around as a place to, and provide Moscow as a place to raise children and to the benefit of all of us. Thank you very much.
And now Mr. Steed.
Thank you. I'm Walter Steed and want to thank New St. Andrews for giving me this opportunity to visit with you as well as the rest of the candidates. I've done this for every city election that you've held this event, and I'm glad to be back. I'm pleased to have in the audience this afternoon my wife, Mary. Between us, we have 5 grown children and 13 grandchildren. I moved to Lewiston in 1978 and have been in Moscow since 1989. For the past 32 years, I've been a self-employed consultant providing grant writing and project management services for Idaho cities and utility districts on public works projects. Before joining the council 6 years ago, I served on the Moscow Transportation Commission for 9 years, the last 4 as chair. I am concerned there's been very little appearance of progress with the reconstruction of Highway 95 from Thorn Creek to Moscow. The schedule that was given to us 4 years ago has not been adhered to and now seems to be looking toward an indefinite date, mentioned as possibly 2015, but only if another lawsuit is not filed. How many additional deaths and injuries must the public endure before this outdated road is replaced with a proper highway? I do not know what the city can do to expedite the process. I have talked personally with the governor, the head of the Idaho Department of Transportation, and would be willing to take the lead with the council in doing anything that would get a modern highway built on some route as soon as possible. I've served for 6 years on the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, attempting to learn more about our aquifers and how to keep our water flowing. For years, I've questioned the all-too-ready-to-take-it use of the 3% annual property tax increase of Moscow, and again this year voted a principled no on the budget. Currently, I am president of the City Council and chair of the City Entryway Beautification Steering Committee, which is an outgrowth of my council goal of improving the appearance of Moscow's highway system. I am concerned that for the last 7 years, Alturas Technology Park has not seen any new businesses. Perhaps it's time we re-looked at the restrictive covenants and zoning. If elected, I will provide continued moderate, common-sense leadership for Moscow with an emphasis on economic development and support for New St. Andrews. Thank you, and we appreciate what y'all bring to downtown Moscow.
And Mr. Weber.
Thank you. First, a couple of housekeeping issues. Number one, I've got that crud that's going around, so if my voice breaks up, it won't be because of an emotional overload. It's just that it's going to break up. And the second thing, Bob, Roy, what did I ever do to you so that you put the biggest, most clumsy person closest to the edge? And I thought you liked me. I don't know. Anyway, I can remember being in this theater back when I was in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. I came to Moscow 1954, starting the 3rd grade. Went to 3rd through 8th at St. Mary's School, and then Moscow High School, the University of Idaho, and then got an MBA in 76 from the university. I've worked in Moscow in various jobs since then, most of the time in the beverage industry. I started out as a route truck driver and ended up as the manager in the Latah County, the Latah County side of the business. I retired, opened a store, sold the store, got bored with retirement, went back to work, and then I retired finally on the 3rd of May of this year. And I think it'll stick this time, but I do need something else to do. I was on the city council from 2006 through 2009. I enjoyed it very much. I think Moscow needs more growth. We don't need petrochemical plants or anything like that, but we need some light industrial. We need more housing. We need more business. And because what this will do, it'll help us spread the tax burden out so the 3% that Walter talked about will not have to be called into play as often as it is. So once again, I thank you for having me here, and I'm enjoying looking forward to the questions from Mr. Santiago.
We have one more. Yeah, we've got it. So thank you, sir. Laura Russell, actually, we now have a statement from Laura representing Rebecca Rod, and then questions will be afterwards. So in order to, this is so that all of the candidates have been equally represented. So Laura has a statement from Ms. Rod.
As Sam said, this is a statement from candidate Rebecca Rod. Ever since I moved to Moscow in 1984 to work at the University of Idaho Library, I have loved living here. Our city combines the perfect blend of the best quality of life attributes: beauty, charm, smarts, culture, and a strong sense of community that strives to include everyone. All of these things make Moscow the best place for me and my family to live, and I know many of you feel that way too. I am running for a seat on City Council because I am ready to step up and contribute what I can to help Moscow continue to thrive and grow in ways that retain our shared values. I have a BA in English and an MA in library science and have lived in Moscow for almost 30 years. I have been a homeowner and had my own business here, RRR Pottery, for over 17 years. Besides being a self-employed artist, I spend much of my time helping my elderly mother, who lives here as well. I worked at the U of I for a total of 15 years in a few different positions, including as librarian, as the marketing manager of the UI Press, and as a program coordinator for Women's Center. I have been a member of the local Unitarian Universalist Church for over 20 years and have been partnered with the love of my life for 22. I am heavily invested in our community and have been involved in it in various ways, particularly through the arts and through human rights. I've served on the Moscow Arts Commission, and this year I was honored to receive the Martin Luther King Human Rights Community Award from the Latah County Human Rights Task Force. I possess a number of abilities and skills that spring out of my life experience, and I believe will be of value to my service as a council person for Moscow. Among them, my creative thinking, my ability to work cooperatively, and my desire to be collaborative in finding workable solutions for whatever issues come our way. Thank you for sharing the statement, and I hope that those of you who are able to vote in Moscow will consider voting for me. Sincerely and with best regards, Rebecca Rod.
And so again, that was for our fourth city council candidate. So now we will move into the question portion of the city council discussion. So we'll begin with Santiago. You have 8 minutes to ask questions of Mr. Weber.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Thank you to all the candidates who came, to the audiences here as well. The first question I have for you is concerning the recent report commissioned by the Greater Moscow Alliance. In the Q&A at the Best Western, you were quoted as saying that we've got to get rid of the idea that Moscow is just a small bedroom community to Pullman and Lewiston. The small bedroom community was language used in the report. I would like to explore this comment further. Do you mean that we should not be a bedroom community at all, or that we should not be a small bedroom community and that we should strive to be a better bedroom community?
I think that we are always going to be a bedroom community, as is Pullman, as is Lewiston. There are always going to be people that live in one city and work in another. But what I don't think we should be is we should not be considered, well, I'm going to go to work in Lewiston, so I'll live in Moscow. I'm going to go to work in Pullman, so I'll live in Moscow, because Moscow is this nice, tiny, quaint little place. Actually, I think Moscow is fairly vibrant and could be much more vibrant. One of the reasons that I'm really involved and committed to getting some growth in Moscow is that the expenses the city runs into on a yearly basis, daily basis, are the same as they are with all the people in this room. They go up. We can either not have as many services, we can increase the taxes, which nobody really wants, or we can broaden the tax base. I am in favor of broadening the tax base so we can keep the services that the city provides and at the same time not having to cut them and not having to raise the city taxes, even though the city council can only raise 3% a year.
Okay, thank you. Given the last decade of basically economic growth in the city of Moscow, how will we know when, after working with taxes and diversifying the economic base, how will we know when Moscow has left this plateau of no economic growth?
I think there are some fairly easy and easily seen ways. Number one, the University of Idaho student population growth will be a good judge of that. The number of people in Moscow, if Moscow grew like 2% a year, that would be essentially 450 more people living here. And then also, if the building permits for not only industrial, light industrial, motor business, and housing, when they start growing, and we're able to hopefully plateau and reverse a little of the people living in Moscow and working in other places. I think that'll start to tell us that we've kind of gone over the hump and we're going in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the housing market. You mentioned the businesses that are locally in town. Communities usually strive to agree on the big picture issues like safe roads and zoning and business growth, schools, that sort of thing. And most of the disagreements come in the small picture issues. But here in Moscow, it seems as if even the bigger issues are always up for debate. So saying when the house market grows or when the U of I alums stay seems to be even up for debate in this community. Why is that? Why do you think Moscow is not in agreement on the big picture issues all the time?
I would think it would be because we've got a real diverse population here in town. We've got the university, we've got the farming, we've got the people that work for the university but are not part of the staff, the educational staff, and then we've got the people that live in Moscow that work over in Pullman at Schweitzer. And all of these people have got different ideas on what will make it work, whatever it is. And I think that's one of the reasons that we do have a great difference of opinion on what should be here and what should not be here.
Okay. And that is an agreement, I think, with page 6 of the summary that says Moscow is a deeply divided community with a conflicted vision of future growth. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. The report also stated that one of the biggest economic challenges that the community faces is complacency, both in Moscow and the University of Idaho, and that it's economically risky to take any portion of the local economic base for granted. How do you think that Moscow, in its progressive liberal mindset, in an otherwise very conservative state, has let complacency taken hold of it?
It's a tough one. Are you sure that you shouldn't be speaking Spanish at this point? I think that what we have to do, or what we should do, is we ought to decide where we're going. And I probably am not answering this question the way you wanted it answered, but I think we need to decide where we're going, how best to get there, and then try to bring in the various factions to get them to come in, and so that we can have a focused, united front. And at the same time, we can keep the things in Moscow that make Moscow a great place to live. Farmers Market being one of them. And the various musical and artistic things that happen in town. Those things we can continue, and we can all join together on that. However, on some of the basic issues, we're going to have to, everybody's going to have to maybe give a little, get a little.
Okay, when you mentioned keeping the things that are already in town, how do we come together when we want new businesses, but we see what is already in place? How do we grow with what is already in place without jumping into oh, we need to bring more businesses? How do we start growing with what is already in place in Moscow?
That can be quite difficult, because what we have in town is fairly diverse. We've got any number of businesses, and if you take a look up and down Main Street, mostly during the day, on the evenings, oh, I only have 10 seconds. I think what we can do is we have to find things that we don't have and see if we can't bring them in. And if we're able to do that, I think we're going to reach a level of success that we have yet to reach.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And now we will have Maddie come up to the stage, and she has questions for Mr. Steed.
Good afternoon. The first question that I had for you is about Moscow's economy. Santiago talked a lot about this already. There's been a lot of talk recently about a study that Stephen Peterson did that studied Moscow's economy over the past years, especially how the past decade has been really rough as far as Moscow's growth. And as a council member for the past 6 years, how do you explain Moscow's lack of growth while cities like Pullman and Lewiston and Clarkston are actually growing?
John has already pointed out that we're a special kind of community. I used to live in Lewiston, and I contend there's nowhere on this earth you can go 30 miles and find two cities more different than Lewiston and Moscow without crossing an international border. We're totally dependent upon the universities up here, including New St. Andrews. Y'all bring a lot of people to this town. Y'all are not the population of this town. You bring parents and siblings to it as well. But we ebb and flow with the universities. We tend to build a lot. When we find out it's hard to rent spaces, we build a lot of apartments, and then we stop till it catches up again. So it ebbs and flows. More stable towns like, say, Lewiston, that's got the Clearwater Paper Company or Potlatch or the bullet factories or the large hospital and so forth, are a little more stable. I think that explains Lewiston. Pullman, on the other hand, is dealing with, 20,000 students at Washington State, a lot more than we've got here in town. And they've grown greatly the last several years because the University of Washington focused on international students because they could make more money off of them, and the students in the state of Washington that wanted to go to UW couldn't get in. So they've really come over to WSU. So we're kind of working in our own little world, about 1% a year, which is what we've done for a long, long time.
So what about the cities like Lewiston and Clarkston, LCSCs down there, and they have a student base as well? Do they just depend on the other things that are involved in their economy rather than their college?
Yes. LCSC is very small in the scheme of things. You know, they're maybe, 12% of the size of WSU. They don't have the kind of impact that the universities have up here. They've got a much larger, just plain community of people that are not affiliated with the college. Here, almost everybody's affiliated with the colleges, and as the report pointed out, 50% of our economy is the university.
You talked in your opening about how you voted no on the city budget. And as a proponent for fiscal responsibility, you believe in insisting on a city budget that's based on needs for the city rather than wants that the city has. So what are some of those wants for the city that you have voted to deny, and why did you vote to deny them?
It doesn't matter what I vote to deny. It doesn't matter what I vote to approve. It takes 4 votes for the city council to do anything. So I have to convince my fellow council members to agree with me before we can do anything. I sometimes am successful. Other times I'm not. Tom Lamar on the city council takes almost pride in the fact that he's had the most defeats at 5-1 votes. I take pride in probably the fact that I'm number 2 without any challenger, and that I get a fair number of 5-1s myself. I just don't think that even during the recession, the city of Moscow government felt the recession. And that told me that it was doing really well. We never had to really get challenged about how are we going to write a budget this year. We did stop raises for some of the employees during that time. City council members at that time didn't take any raises either. But it's a real challenge, and you've just got to convince 3 other people and be able to count to 4 to make anything work.
Earlier this year, you signed a letter recommending some tighter restrictions to Idaho's gun laws, and you got a lot of flack about that letter. You were criticized by members of your own party. So could you explain what went on with the situation and what your position is on the Second Amendment overall?
The letter you're referring to was written by the chief of police at, I believe, the behest of the mayor. Doesn't mean she told him how to write it. I think he wanted to write it. It was his writing. And I saw it as president of the council, I don't know, a couple of weeks before it came before council. I recommended a couple of changes in it. One was to change it into a please consider letter to the legislature as opposed to anything else. It was a list of recommendations, as you said. We took out, the council as a whole, took out references to assault weapons and to calibers over 50 caliber in size. We were told that muzzle loaders would have a problem if that were in there. So we tempered it slightly, not a lot. And it came as a result of the really bad school shooting at Sandy Hook. Everybody was upset about it. Everybody was on edge about it. What I'm afraid of is we're going to get used to those things, that we're going to start having a school shooting every week, and all of a sudden it's not a big deal anymore? That's just outrageous. I'm a proponent for the Second Amendment, but that does not mean that Michael Bloomberg could afford to, because he can, would go buy an F-16 fighter jet and arm it. I don't think the Constitution gives him that ability, or it shouldn't.
So your main concern was the safety for the overall community as a whole?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I ride with the Moscow Police Department periodically just to see what's going on in town. And every time I do, and when I leave those guys, I tell them to be safe because they're out there at risk because they're targets. You know, saw shootings of police officers in Seattle just because they were police officers. So they're doing their best to protect us. They don't need to come around a corner into somebody in body armor with an assault weapon or a howitzer.
And you believe that the recommendations that you made will promote that safety and ensure it?
No, ma'am, I do not. I said at the council that I thought that letter was going into the garbage can when it got to Boise. And from everything I've heard, it did. It had no impact whatsoever, except backfire on some of us on the council.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. You talked in your opening about how you're involved in the beautification committee in town and working on public highways. So I was wondering how you go about building more sidewalks and beautifying the entrance to town while dealing with some of the private property rights that go along with making Moscow a more beautiful place.
Sidewalks are built in the public right-of-way for the most part. So that is a city decision and operation. We do pass to the private property owners the responsibility to maintain those sidewalks. We now have a program where we assist them in repairing their sidewalks. We buy bulk sidewalk installation during the summer in various and sundry grant programs and city funding that we do. And so we make it possible for a property owner that needs his sidewalk to be replaced to get in on our contract and what we're paying for those large quantities of sidewalk work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. And lastly, we have Stephen asking questions of Mr. Bettge.
First of all, thank you for coming and opening yourself up for questions. That's brave. I have a few. Around town, your signs tend to be grouped with Nancy Chaney and Rebecca Rod. Sometimes see them with the other side. But at the same time, the Political Action Committee of the Greater Moscow Alliance has endorsed you as a candidate. So both sides seem to like you. Why is that?
Well, that would be putting myself in their heads quite, but I have tried to run a campaign not against anybody, but for issues. And I think that tends to put me somewhat in both camps. I tend to be pro-economic development or diversification, and I tend to be somewhat socially progressive as well. So that puts me with a foot in either camp, but as much as it is advantageous for an election, it can also be problematic because you tend to get hand grenades tossed from either direction as well. So I'm not sure how this is all going to work out, but I tend by my nature to the pragmatic middle, and I hope there's enough common ground with folks on either direction that they can support me.
So does that tie in with your comment in the opening statement that Moscow is very polarized right now? Yeah,
it is. I think people like to oversimplify at times, where they like to have one catch-all label that then paints a broad stroke across all other issues with which somebody is associated. And I like to think that politics and city government are much more subtle than that. And I like to think that people should be able to see through it by studying the issues. So yeah, there's polarization just because it makes it easy, but it shouldn't be.
All right, thank you. You've mentioned, I was going to say in the past, that's what my notes say, but you also mentioned in your opening statement that you like your democracy messy, by which I think you mean that you like to hear from people before you make a decision. You like to hear from the constituency. But listening, and while listening to both good ideas and bad ideas, then making your decision. But the thing that occurs to me is that this only seems to include the loudmouths and squeaky wheels in Moscow, while those of us who maybe are working during a city council meeting can't make it, will not get a say. Does your messy democracy favor the loud people and the squeaky wheels?
I hope not. And one, I wouldn't call them good ideas or bad ideas. I'd call them diverse ideas that can be melded somewhere into a coherent whole. I would hope that people don't feel left out. In my time on planning and zoning, anybody who's shown up has been afforded the opportunity to speak and to be heard by that commission. And I'd like to see that continue on to City Council as well. The opportunity is always there to write an email or a letter and have it read into the record as we go. Additionally, the phone is always available. Walk into City Hall and talk to us. And I would hope that we would listen and give everybody some contributions.
All right, so you would just encourage those who aren't maybe as vocal to just get vocal and let your voice be heard?
Yeah, it's pretty intimidating when you get up at a podium at a very formal public meeting. Some people just are not good public speakers and would rather have their teeth pulled, really. So yeah, write letters beforehand, participate, or persuade some more loquacious associate to come in and speak in your stead.
All right, thank you. Another common theme in your campaign has been that you'd like to see Moscow plan further into the future than it has been, maybe 30 to 50 years. Having been the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission for many years, you must have thought a lot about economic growth, and it's come up throughout this forum. What is your plan for economic growth?
I would like to see us diversify ourselves away from complete dependence, well, not complete, but substantial dependence on the university for what the city rises and falls with in terms of its budget. I'd like to see us go forth and do more work on the Southeast Industrial Zone, which is down by Paradise Creek, and put in some initial lots so that if a company chooses to come to Moscow, they can come in and they can sit down, they can have a home. They don't have to go through zoning, they don't have to go through all kinds of infrastructure development. Boom, there's your home, come in and develop there. And the reason we need that is because with the inception of Legacy Crossing, we've pretty much erased all the industrial zoning this town has. So right now, if somebody wanted to come in, they would be hard-pressed to find a place where they could just set up and do business. So we need to take that first step almost immediately and get into things like manufacturing, not necessarily retail or service, but fundamental manufacturing, agricultural co-packers, instrument makers, shoot, even software writers, which doesn't take any brick and mortar at all.
All right, so in a industrial zone like that, would a place like, I know Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories over in Pullman has been huge for their economy and ours. Is that something that would be welcome in that kind of industrial zone?
Heavens, yeah, God, I would so love to have a Schweitzer type operation here. Also over in Pullman, you've got Decagon, which makes water activity instruments, and they're a growing concern. They're up to a couple hundred employees now, and that would be another good one that I would love to see a similar operation establish itself.
How about something like, I know Walmart's been a big controversy here recently. How about something like Walmart, say Target or something like that?
I think the community is pretty ready for it. The big controversy with Walmart and other large box stores has been with the wages they pay, are we actually putting a financial burden on the rest of the people who are in town in case these people can't support themselves and their families, and essentially if they have a medical crisis they have to go to the emergency room and the rest of the community picks up that tab. And I think that's the center of everybody's concern over the large-scale retailers. Other than that, I think they provide tax income to the city. We have areas zoned already for large-scale retail. Up behind the current Palouse Mall, there's 20 or 30 acres of space ready to go right now for large-scale retail.
Cool. One thing that you have mentioned in at least one interview that I listened to is that you like to facilitate, and it's also on your pamphlet out there, I was reading it before, you'd like to facilitate bicycle and pedestrian transportation. Having lived here in Moscow for the last 3 years, I haven't had any problems with riding my bike around. And I'm just curious, what is there left to do?
I'd like to see us do a better job of separating motorized vehicles and bike pedestrian traffic to the extent possibly possible. When kids are going off to school, if you can keep them out of the road where their cars are moving, so much the better. I live up in the northeast corner of town, and if I want to go to the university, I usually wind up going through this intersection right over here, and trying to navigate 3rd and Main on a bike is an intimidating prospect at the best of times. I think that bikes don't belong on walks because the second syllable of sidewalk is walk, not ride. And so keeping bikes out of there so you're not having pedestrian bike collisions is also good. But yeah, I really would like to see extension of the bike paths to the extent possible as new development occurs.
All right. And we don't have much time left, but is that, is your vision for that part of a larger philosophy? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think the larger philosophy is to keep Moscow feeling like Moscow instead of just another large economically vibrant area. Maybe think about South LA or East St. Louis. These are economically going concerns, but who wants to live there? And part of what makes Moscow and gives it a sense of place is exactly this kind of thing, where we can provide alternatives and a quality of life that other communities don't enjoy.
All right, thank you.
You're first, Mr. Bettge.
Oh, I'm still up. You're first for president.
All right, so now we will. Can you hear me? We will now move into closing remarks. So, Mr. Bettge, we'll begin with you. You have 3 minutes.
3 whole minutes, wow. Well, I've been trying to sort of project a vision of what I see Moscow's possibilities as being. We want to grow, we want to provide more economic diversity. I would like to see us keep more of our college graduates around in town instead of shipping them off to benefit other communities with their talents. To do that, we have to bring in some more employers. We have to bring in a wide range of other economic prospects. And that, I think, will keep people around and start providing a kernel from which the rest of the community can grow. And on the other side of that coin is the tricky bit about how do you avoid turning Moscow into another generic cutout community surrounded by large-scale retail, big box stores, 4 or 5 lanes of traffic going in every direction that pretty much chops the city up into bits. We need to maintain our feel. We need to maintain the quality of downtown. I think Legacy Crossing does a very good job of providing an extension of downtown that would help not only the Legacy Crossing area, but downtown in general, providing a link between here and the university. New St. Andrews is already downtown. They don't have to have a link to the rest of the town. They're already here. So with that, I'd like to see us diversify, retain, and keep the sense of place that Moscow is. And that, I mean the bike trails and things like that. And the other tricky bit that we have looking at is as we grow, where are we going to get the water? We have to think very carefully in the 30, 50-year time frame before us about where are we going to get the water. In-town catch basins, reservoirs on the mountains, the uber expensive stick a straw into the Snake Clearwater River. Who knows, it's definitely stuff that we need to start working on now because each year that goes by is a year we lose in the future when we may really start needing some more water. Conservation has helped, but it's not the whole story. So we all have to pull together as a community so we can all sit and think about how to maintain Moscow's funky little town feel while becoming a bigger, more vibrant community economically. So on Tuesday, think about voting for me. I'd appreciate it a lot.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Steed, your podium.
Thank you. For the literary types in the room, I would like to point out the lady on the front row that's knitting. She explained to me that's not knitting, it's crocheting, I think she said. But if you remember your high school Tale of Two Cities, there was a lady in that book that was knitting also. If I hear hammering out in the lobby, I'm going out the back. Yeah, is it the best of times or the worst of times? We don't know. I want to thank Ms. Schlect for her questioning. At least she didn't do what happened to me the last time I was up here, which was say, in 2003 you said so-and-so, and what did you mean by that? And I spent the entire time, I don't know how I answered it, but I was trying to figure out, where did they find that? She did ask me a question that I want to elaborate on, though. And that is, she talked about the fact that she mentioned the fact that I got in trouble with some people for the gun violence letter. Those people that I got in trouble with were the Latah County Republican Party. I'm chairman of that party, and someone had asked me about 2 years earlier, is there any problem with being on the council and being chairman of the Latah County Republican Party? I said, no, it's 2 different things. One's nonpartisan, one's partisan. They don't meet. I learned differently. When the city council voted unanimously to adopt the anti-discrimination ordinance, I got censored by the party for that. So there is a big difference. I never thought about it before those things happened, but it's what you get into. The other comment I'd like to make is there were some questions up here about I'm not sure who said loud mouths and squeaky wheels, whether it was the respondent or the questioner. The one thing I've learned on city council is we don't hear from enough people. I thought our phone would ring off the hook, and it just doesn't do it. So I would encourage you, if you have a question or a point to make it. I'm the candidate who understands that the city of Moscow continues to have its work cut out for it. We must attract or develop new business in order to create the economic development necessary to continue to be a vibrant community. The council needs to work from a budget based on needs rather than wants in order to hold down tax and fee increases. I advocate multimodal transportation and efficient use of natural resources and looking for ways to achieve the growth that is necessary. The city needs to do whatever it can to see Highway 95 south of town rebuilt into a more modern highway, regardless of the route. I believe my willingness to listen, my moderate voice on the council, my knowledge of the issues will allow me to help Moscow continue to be a desirable place to live, work, and play. Each candidate has a different asset and attributes to bring to the city council. I would appreciate your vote on November 5. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to hearing you sing again in a few moments. Y'all are really great.
And Mr. Weber.
Only one coughing fit, not bad. I would like to thank, number one, all of you for showing up today, and to thank the panelists for the probing questions. They weren't that easy. I think that there, even up here among us candidates, are some misconceptions. I think that no one has spoken about being in favor of sprawl. No one has spoken about being in favor of traffic going every which way. What we are in favor of, what I'm in favor of, is improving the business climate so that we can bring more dollars into the city coffers, and we can then provide more of the services that the city's citizens want. And if we are going to continually battle over the nuances between sprawl or too much business or not enough business, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. We've got to get past that. And since I've said that, I'll go on to a more normal finish. I'm in favor of growth. I'm in favor of expanding Moscow's economic base. I'm in favor of keeping the things about Moscow that make it fun to live, a good place to live. I think we can do that. At the same time, we can have some growth and hopefully do more of these things, or at least keep the tax increases that we all face down, and keep the level and the quality of services that the city provides up. And with that, I'll just ask you for your vote, John Weber, City Council, on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the city council portion of the debate. Let's give a round to our candidates. As they make their way off the stage, we would ask the mayoral candidates to come to the stage. And we will begin with opening remarks from Mrs. Chaney.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank the organizers of today's event. This is always a very cordial occasion with lots of adventure introduced, so I'm looking forward to that later. I also want to thank New St. Andrews College and the New Art Theater, and congratulate all of you for your interest in the future of our city and for your interest in the candidates' presentations today. I've served as Moscow's mayor since 2006, and it has been more invigorating every day. The breadth of my background, I think, is well suited to the role, the versatility that's required of a mayor here. I worked for many years as a registered nurse. I have a degree in social sciences and environmental science. I worked for a time as an archaeologist. My husband and I are small business owners. And I think in a place like Moscow that's so heavily focused on education, it's critically important that we can speak the language of a variety of community interests. So not just the academicians with our colleges and universities, but also the people who are in the workaday lives, the people who are impoverished, the students who are here sometimes just for a short while. And I think that the ability to speak with them cogently, to be considerate and respectful of their concerns is vitally important. And I have those talents in part because of my work as a nurse, the role I played with environmental science as relates to our declining groundwater supply, for example, is an ongoing regional conversation. We have an array of issues to address, but as you know, Moscow is already a terrific place. We have a lot of attributes. We've laid the groundwork strategically for an even brighter future, and I would like to continue being part of that. I ask for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Mr. Lambert, your opening remarks.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, New St. Andrews, and what a wonderful crowd that we have out here. In 1977, my late wife and I came to Moscow. I was the manager here at Safeway, right where the co-op is right now, folks. We raised 2 sons here to be wonderful grown men. I have 2 daughter-in-laws here and 5 gorgeous grandchildren. And what I would like mostly to do is to be able to see those 5 grandchildren of mine be able to have the same things that I've been able to have throughout the years. My little vast background, I've worked for Safeway for 36 years. 33 of those years I've been in the management end of it. I've mentored, managed, developed, trained, and facilitated hundreds of employees. We have different types of programs at Safeway. Through many corporations have this. Frontline Leadership is one. When I was a key instrumental player in developing that program. And also RCDC, which is a retail development of those wanting to come up through the management ranks. I take great pride in the folks that I was able to do that with. I'm a terrific facilitator, and that's what a lot of this is about. Now, for my background, I've got an associate arts degree in business administration and a bachelor's of science degree in management technology. From the city standpoint, what I've done, I was on planning and zoning for 4 years, past council for 4 years, from 2006 through 2009, 2 of those years as council president. The past 4 years, I've been on the Board of Adjustment, and I have been the chair of that board for the last 2 years. And what I think we have here in Moscow is we do have some complacency, and we need to have a little bit of an urgent tone about what we can do. Can we make it happen? Absolutely. But as a facilitator, I need to be able to get all parties together to be able to get that accomplished. And I do believe, folks, I can do that. Can we make it happen for ourselves? Absolutely. We can do it. It's not that tough. Let's get back to the basics. Please vote for me on November 5th. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I will have Laura Russell come to the stage, and she has 6 minutes to ask questions of you first, Ms. Lambert.
Hello, Mr. Lambert. How are you today?
I'm terrific, Laura. How are you?
Very well, thank you. On October 18th, you were quoted in a news article as follows. Our growth has been very stagnant for a while. We're growing in very small portions here in Moscow, and University of Idaho has had no growth over the last 10 years, end quote. What do you think has caused this lack of economic growth?
Well, I've talked all the way through my campaign. I've talked about complacency and the urgency that we need to do to move forward, Laura. And one of those things we've talked about where we've gone, we do not even grow 1% a year. It's been less than 1%. That's tough to keep up with the infrastructure and the services that we'd like to all enjoy here in Moscow. With the University of Idaho,
And all you kids are terrific at numbers, and I'm a numbers guy. I'm an analyst, so I know a lot of these things. It was just released that we're down over 600 students, and 600 students at the University of Idaho this fall from past semesters. Recent analysis showed us that there's roughly what the economy has with each student, so roughly about $57,000. If you take those $57,000 times that 600, you're going to look at over 34 million bucks that we're going to lose in retail sales throughout the economy. That's the whole economy, not just one person, but how it filters through our economy. That's a chunk of money, and that's the sort of thing that we need to work on. That's what I was talking about, Laura, and those are the sort of things why we need to get the numbers at the university up, because it's all about money and our economic development here in Moscow.
All right, so how do you think we can increase enrollment at the University of Idaho?
Well, I think from the university's standpoint, one of the things we've had in the last 15 years, we've had 7 new presidents. We haven't had a consistency there, so I'm really hoping that the Board of Regents, when they elect this next person as our president, is somebody that's going to be committed to our town, for our city, for a number of years, because we've got to get consistency at the university in order to make it grow. We also have to be able to forge our way with Boise to make this happen as well. And as a facilitator, I think I'm a guy that can really make that happen for us. I talk to all people. I have nobody that I'm going to shy away from, and I'm all about Moscow. But that's what we need to do. And we also need to get that growth, we need to do our industrial park, and we need to get things going so we can keep some of the kids that are going to school, that are getting degrees, that are graduating here, and to stay here in our fine community.
On the topic of the industrial park, could you give us a very brief summary of what you would like to see happen there and a time frame in which it would happen?
Well, our industrial park, when I was on council, when I was council president, I was the liaison for our comprehensive plan rewrite, and we designated an area for our industrial park, and this has been over 6 years ago. And we really haven't done anything with that park as of yet, and we need to get going with it now. And what we need is light industrial. Now, there's been conversations up here about different groups, whether it be a Schweitzer or others, but we need to try to develop and work on that to get somebody to come into our area so that we can develop these jobs. Light industrial, that are environmentally clean for us, and that can enhance those that are getting their educations here as well.
So, as a prospective mayor, if you were elected, what practical steps would you take to be able to encourage that development?
Well, the first thing I think we need to do is talk about it and focus on it. And I think that's something that we've really lacked here, is the focus on that. One of the biggest things that will kill us or failure is a lack of focus. If we focused on that, we do have an economic guy in our city, Jeff Jones. We need to find out what he is doing. We also need to find out what our community development person, Bill Belknap, is doing. We need to investigate this and push it forward. And that's where my focus and my concentration will be.
All right, thank you. But do you have any, possibly just 1 or 2 specific plans of action? Sorry to push the question.
Well, the specific plans is, how do we know what we don't know? We don't know what we can't do here in Moscow because we haven't gone there yet. So I'm not sure how to answer that, Laura, other than, yes, we'll look into it. We've got the Chamber of Commerce as well. We've got a number of things to look after that can grow this thing for us.
All right, thank you. You mentioned a little bit about public participation and complacency in your opening comments. What would you do as a mayor to solve that problem?
Well, it would be easy to have a number of round tables. That's what a facilitator does, round tables, and have some community people, and I'm talking about the business community as well as the university community and even New St. Andrews as far as that goes, to get some great ideas. Collectively, we need to work together. If we do that, we do that right, it'll work for us.
All right. One of the other topics mentioned in the council race was the topic of urban sprawl. Could you briefly describe how, while encouraging economic growth, which you've said you would like to do, you would still maintain the small community that we enjoy at Moscow?
You know, actually, that would be kind of a fun thing to have to deal with, urban sprawl, because we clearly don't have that. With the lack of growth we have here, how do we control that? We had a question the other day, how we on the accelerating growth, what would we do with that? And this is kind of the same question that you're asking, Laura. It's not an issue right now. We don't need to focus on it at this time.
All right, so to push the hypothetical question, if you were able to achieve economic growth, at what point would economic growth be too much for you as a mayor?
Economic growth would be too much when we can't control it. When will we know to tap the brakes? We need to put the accelerator on and not tap the brakes right now, Laura. So that's a question you can't answer. And I don't want to give you a hypothetical on it because I'd like to see us grow.
think we have time for, no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Mayor Chaney, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. On October 18th, in the same report previously quoted, you were quoted as saying, "We are doing surprisingly well relative to others around our state and around our country." And not to flog the dead horse, but the Peterson Pool report has already been brought up numerous times. But the conclusion of that report was that Moscow's economy relative to the other Quad cities is not growing. With that in mind, could you briefly characterize what you consider to be a healthy economy and in what ways Moscow is healthy and unhealthy?
Mm-hmm. Well, we did fare better than most other cities around the state and around the region because we don't have the booms and busts in our local economy, largely because of the stability of being based in higher education and healthcare and government. Like so many of my colleagues up here today, I favor diversification of the economic base. I do want to mention that when I delivered my State of the City address in February, the statistics were that 3 of the top 5 years in commercial development ever recorded had occurred within the last 5 years. We have seen growth in the value of Alturas Technology Park, which is Zone Research Technology and Office, growing from $6.4 million at its founding in 1996 to over $22 million today. We've seen incremental growth over the decades here, ranging from just around 1% to about 1.5%, 1.9% in some occasions. So it's been small incremental growth. We don't have a Schweitzer Engineering here, despite my best efforts to convince Ed Schweitzer otherwise. We are not Washington State University, and our state does not afford the funding opportunities that the state of Washington does to its institutions around the state. So what would I do to improve the economic status of our city and enhance its economic well-being? Certainly the diversification of which we just spoke, the idea that we'll have mixed-use development in Legacy Crossing, which just today we issued the press release, received an Idaho Smart Growth Award. So research, the kinds of facilities that we talked about before, residential, commercial, entertainment space, public gathering spaces in that brownfield area between the campus and downtown, that would diversify the base. A light industrial park with manufacturing and assembly jobs, working with our area community colleges, and I know that LCSU was mentioned a moment ago. Walla Walla Community College out of Clarkston is also an exemplary model of forward-thinking opportunities for people who may not be inclined to 4-year degrees and above. So apprenticeship and certificate programs, I think, would also go a long way toward that. Did I address your question?
You did, thank you.
Yes.
To follow up on that, you mentioned Schweitzer and your best efforts to convince them to come here. Could you offer some insight as to why Moscow may not be as attractive to large businesses? Because there has been some media concern with car dealerships leaving Moscow and other businesses not coming, that we're not attractive to that sort of business. Do you think that's a problem? And if so, what plans do you have to change that?
Well, although Moscow does not yet have a business registration requirement, it's rather difficult to track the number of business startups and closures. But I understand we've had about 19 new businesses open within the last year. We've had 8 closures, which is normal in a dynamic economy. I think people begin to get restless subsequent to a recession, and that's the good thing about the capitalist motives, that we decide, the national recession it has concluded. Lenders are starting to loan again, the banks and savings and loan associations, and developers are looking for places like Moscow. And as you read the economic reports from around the country, they're not looking to invest in the same old things that they have done over the years, but something that's cutting edge, such as we anticipate here in our community. I think that Moscow is an attractive place. I can tell you that local government has little, if anything, to do with corporate decisions decisions or bankruptcies, such as we saw with some of our car dealerships who have departed, I absolutely think we are primed to receive a new car dealership. And one of my roles is to go around, when I'm at state and national meetings, when I'm speaking with regional colleagues, when I go to the Targets or the Costco's or the Trader Joe's or whatever, to leave my card, leave a note. And I created the position for the economic development specialist as well, so that he can be out there working with other economic development organizations to make that happen.
Okay, thank you. So just to put a point on the question, do you think that Moscow is attractive to businesses like Schweitzer and Walmart?
I do.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes. May I elaborate just a moment? I do want to say that Mr. Schweitzer actually is a product of Washington State University. Pullman is his home. I harbor no grudge or wonderment as to why he would choose to have his business in Pullman. We are a regional economy here in the Palouse Knowledge Corridor, and that makes sense. Walmart, although it closed, came back, and I think Mr. Peterson neglected to mention that when he first presented, but Walmart actually expanded on site, did not leave us with that empty big box, and actually made a more energy efficient, resource conserving store, and then donated $87,500 to the same bus service that New St. Andrews students have supported over the years.
All right, thank you. Very briefly, you've mentioned the industrial park and development there. Could you provide some practical things like a time frame and the number of jobs that you would expect would be provided by this development?
Well, the preliminary master plan has been developed already. We had some consultants look at that site, and the opportunities for reconfiguring the floodplain to expand the buildable area by some 80% will allow larger kinds of commercial establishments to go in there. The number of jobs created would depend on the private sector and their willingness to assume risk. Can government help facilitate their objectives? Absolutely, and we would do so by offering the building plats, by working with the Urban Renewal Agency and the Brownfields and EPA.
Thank you very much. We're out of time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We'll now move into the last portion, besides the closing comments, and that's questions from me. So thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Mayor Chaney. I'd like to begin, first of all, thank you so much for your time, sir. We are honored to have you here. I have a general question for the both of you, 2 minutes for you and then 2 minutes for Mr. Lambert. My general question is, in what ways are you most like your opponent, and then in what ways are you least like your opponent?
Oh, great question. Bill and I have known each other for a number of years. We live in the same neighborhood. We worked together when he was on the city council. We're both nice people. We're both relatively centrist. I think we have a commitment to our community. We do have those things in common. How are we different? I think I bring the versatility of being able to interact comfortably with a variety of audiences. I bring the, not just experience, I think that's an overrated concept, but I think the idea that I'm more invigorated every day by the work that I do, and the networking, being able to fit pieces of this puzzle together so that I can go speak with somebody at the Environmental Protection Agency, and perhaps we can keep our community in the good graces of that regulatory agency as we strive to do improvements in our stormwater management system, for example. I can speak with students at New St. Andrews or at the University of Idaho or at one of the grade schools, and hopefully be a role model, especially for some of the young girls and women who would aspire to be, as I've tried to be, like my mother, who was a first-generation college-educated person in her family, and who was doing those things in leadership as well as homemaking, and she was all of those things. So I can be a role model in that way, and I have not been a person to pull the gender card, and I'm not suggesting that today, but rather being able to talk to these youngsters and talk to their parents and talk to academics and talk to regulatory agencies in those ways.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I'd like to turn over to Mr. Lambert for his 2 minutes on the similarities and differences between you and Mayor Chaney.
Nancy and I both love Moscow. We both live in the same neighborhood, and we haven't thrown eggs at each other. Nancy and I have always had a cordial relationship. Where we differ, as I see it, is I've been a manager and a facilitator and a leader in business for decades. And there's a huge difference between that and what Nancy's background has been. And I believe I can facilitate people and make things happen. I'm result-oriented. I've always been result-oriented. So I look at things and see what we can get for results. I like to bring people together and make things happen, Sam. That's how I see it. And that's one of the things that I see where we're lacking a little bit of here in Moscow. Nancy talked about her international connections as well as her connections across America. My focus right now, folks, is here in good old Moscow. This is where we need to have the focus first. We need to fix what we got going on here. And it can be done, Sam. It can be done. We can do it. But I see it as taking care of it here. Where I would like to go is to Boise to see whatever we can get from Boise, because they represent 37% of our funding here in Moscow. And I think there's opportunities out there, Sam, that we haven't explored yet, that we don't know. I made a statement earlier, we don't know what we can't do. And what I'm talking about that is there's opportunities out there we don't even know yet that we haven't explored. And that's what Bill Lambert's all about. I like the chance to do that.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'd like to have you stay, actually, for this next question, then we'll just switch on and off as the questions go on. University of Idaho, it's huge. It's been a topic so far. The statistic came out that it's responsible for 50% of Moscow's income. In your earlier remarks, you mentioned that this next president of the University of Idaho is going to be very crucial in determining growth or not for the university. So my question for you is, as mayor, what role do you see for the city helping a state university grow? What relationship is there between a city government and a state university?
Okay, that's a good question, Sam, and here's how I see it. Whoever a new president is, we need to get together. As mayor, I'm going to say, okay, what is your plan? What do you want to do? The interim president right now, Don Burnett, he wants to raise the enrollment to 16,000 by 2020. I'm hoping that the new president has a similar view, because then you can start mapping things out. Remember, I'm a little analytical here with my management background, and I'm a numbers guy. And so what we have to do is think that out, folks. That's going to be like over 5,000 kids here, around 5,000 kids here in 7 years. Guess what? We're going to have to find jobs for them. We're going to have to find housing for them. We're going to have something here for them to do. Now, that means you have to sit down and have some strategic planning if that's what we're going to do. But we need to see what the new guy thinks. I have no idea what he does, but I hope he's got that vision like Don Burnett does.
And just to point the question, what role do you see yourself playing in helping the state university? You're saying that housing is going to be important. So what does that look like?
Well, right now, if you plop 5,000 kids down here, you're not going to have the housing for them. You're clearly not going to have the jobs for them. So we need to develop that. That's something that and that takes a little planning. That doesn't happen overnight. The good news is, if that's a 7-year project, we got 7 years to figure it out, but we can do the planning stages early. And any type of a management role, any kind of a corporation or any kind of a business, you have a long strategic plan. 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, it would be no different. You plan that out. That's how you do it, Sam.
Okay, thank you, sir. And Mayor Chaney, if you would care to give your perspective on the relationship between a city government and a state university and how we can help U of I, or how we should.
Okay, just to clarify a couple of misperceptions, the new guy could be a she, actually. That's important to note. And students are not just numbers and the bottom line on a spreadsheet. Students are human beings as well. I've worked with with interim president Don Burnett and his predecessors over the last several years. I think building individual relationships is important so that we can find out what the challenges are of our respective organizations. Advocating before the state legislature is important to continue funding for higher ed in our state. I serve as a steering committee member for the University Communities Council of the National League of Cities and advocate there before Congress for funding education, for making student loans affordable. As we look at improving the quality of life and making our community more attractive for students who would come here, as well as the faculty and staff. And I believe that would hold true not just for the University of Idaho, but for others who would come here, including new St. Andrews students as well. So looking for well-paying jobs is important. Providing the resources to get around safely on one's bicycle is important. Doing one-on-one outreach and helping those students move into their dorms, welcoming their parents, making those phone calls, interacting with international organizations as we try to grow the international student population as well. That is focus, that is strategic. It just happens to be a little further reaching, a little broader perspective than some might have.
A follow-up question on that, only a couple seconds left. We heard earlier about WSU's ability to retain its international students, and you just mentioned you would like to see that happen here. How does a community go about retaining international students? I mean, we're Palouse, we're relatively isolated from other regional economic areas. So what's the plan?
That's excellent. The University of Idaho just established the Confucius Institute and is attracting more Chinese students, I think, than any others in this semester. I've met with the past 3 consuls general from Japan, and I have good working relationships with Japan as well, having been a Clare Fellow to that country as we look at economic development potential. But when they come to meet with me, they want to know that the students from Japan are safe in our community. They want to know about community orient and policing. They want to know about Susie Bender and the international programs at the University of Idaho. So attracting international students has a lot to do with personal relationship building to establish trust and to provide the resources they need to get by.
Great, thank you. Moving into the next question for the two of you, and directed at you first, Ms. Chaney. So far today, I've heard about sprawl, bike transportation, compact communities, public transportation. You yourself mentioned smart growth. Mm-hmm. The first time smart growth as a theory came to the public spectrum was 1992 at a United Nations resolution. It was their Agenda 21. So my question is, with that kind of focus on the one hand, and then directed economic development on the other, what's the ultimate objective for your economic development? I know we can talk about diversification and being receptive to new businesses, but what's at the heart of your approach to economic development?
My approach is recognizing from data across the country that business is reinventing itself every day. Some of the former big box stores are recognizing they need to downsize to be more efficient in their own operations. They need to exist peaceably in an historic district such as our downtown. They need to work things out in, for example, this mixed use area, retail, office, residential, entertainment space, all of those things. You can envision a small scale Target in there. Walmart has done this in some places. McDonald's doesn't always have the giant golden arches in front of their building. So a lot of that is driven by the corporate sector and the business community itself. If we pay attention to what our learned people in our institutions of higher learning are teaching us, showing us, bringing from other places, if we pay attention to best practices from cities around the country and even around the world, we will be cutting edge and more desirable for that. Government can't make business do things. We can enforce regulations, but we can't entice them to come or force them to be profitable. We can just enable it, and we can facilitate the groundwork, install the fiber optic systems to make the EMSIs be able to grow and expand. Make it attractive for them to come and let them know about Moscow, Idaho. We can't just exist within our city limits and think people are going to know that we rock, and we live here and we know that.
Okay, great. Thanks. You so much, Ms. Chaney. Mr. Lambert, your 2-minute perspective on your ultimate approach to economic development with smart growth and regional economic development. How do those come together in your vision for Moscow?
Well, my vision for Moscow is, with 2 great universities here, Washington State University and University of Idaho, we have a unique thing in our area that is very seldom in the United States. You've got 2 major universities within 8 miles of proximity. We're well known nationally for that. We don't need to necessarily go right out nationally and find it. There's a lot of folks out there that are very, very innovative that come up with things all the time. I made a statement earlier about we don't know what we can't do, and this is part of it, Sam. There's lots of bright young minds out there, and a couple of things come to my mind. a coin master. I don't know if you guys are familiar with coin master or red box. Those were developed by young people that were in college that wanted to come up and dream of a way of getting a movie easier, or where they could take their loose change and make money. And those entrepreneurs, those young entrepreneurs, are very, very wealthy because you see these red boxes and you see coin masters all over the place. That's what I'm talking about. Now, how do we develop that? How do we get it? We have to have open arms for it. You mentioned earlier when you talked to Nancy about sprawl, and sprawl, in my view, is planning a development where you have distances between subdivisions or buildings, and that's not an issue that we have here in Moscow, and it's because of the zoning we have and the area of impact that we have. That'll never happen in my view here. I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about our numbers. When I came here in '77, we had a little over 16,000 populace. We got over 23,000 now. That's a 7,000 increase in 36 years. If we rent a 2% factor per year, that's roughly about 500 to do the easy math. Over a 10-year period, you're looking at 5,000. Over a 20-year period, you're looking at maybe 12,000 from what we're at right now, which would be 35,000. We can very well handle that. And the confines, now I got a little bit off subject there, but I wanted to bring those numbers to head because they are relevant, because we got to look at what we've done in the past to see what we could do and the possibilities of the future. So see, if we doubled our growth in the next 20 years from what we've had in the last decade, we're not going to be over-sprawled, we're not going to be overgrown, and these developments will come. You get businesses, you get jobs, you get industry, businesses follow industry. That's how it works. That is how the economic cycle works.
Great, thank you, sir. This next question kind of follows closely to that, and it's regarding the zoning that we've been talking about. So I'm going to assume that you both are pro-business, and that you would agree that there's no instance where Moscow should be unwelcoming, unfair, prejudicial to new or existing businesses. So I have a hypothetical for you. If a business is exercising their by right use with their own property, following the rules, using the property as the city zoning allows, what kind of assurances does an owner have under a city governed by you if there was a vocal opposition, a vocal minority who tries to create obstacles for that kind of business?
Thank you. I'm very pro-business. Thus, my platform has been business. I've been in business for decades. And yes, pro-business. If somebody builds something, we need to look at every stone and not let it be unturned. So if somebody wants to build here, and they've complied with the zoning, they've complied with the rules, they've complied with the regulations, you got to remember something. You're always going to have far left or far right. And sometimes as a leader, you listen to them, Sam, you listen to them. I'm a terrific listener, but I can also say no.
So then, regarding the by right use of a property,
the by right use of a property, if it was within the zoning code and within the law and within the regulations, absolutely. Why not?
And if there is a vocal opposition to that, what steps can you take as mayor to enforce and reaffirm the by right use?
I would first want to find out what that vocal opposition was. What's their problem? What's their issue? Does it have merit? Will we listen to them, of course? What is it doing? What harm has it made? Where's it going? What can we do about it? When, what, and where?
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And now for Ms. Chaney.
Well, your premise was, would we ever be unwelcoming or say no to a business? And certainly I think that would be the case in some circumstances. We have a comprehensive plan that is the visioning document. It's a guideline that is put together with input from the citizens of Moscow. And I would encourage any of you who are interested in those kinds of things to become involved, whether as volunteer commissioners or community participants weighing in as stakeholders in these kinds of documents. But there are certain things that would say a heavy water-consuming manufacturing facility or something that would be polluting. We would have some concerns about that, and there might be some regulatory hoops to hop through, whether they're local regulations or state or federal ones. So, it's not, carte blanche type thing. But I think when a use is allowed by right, when the zoning is explicit, when the use is anticipated, hearing from citizens, it's possible that we have missed something as a community. There ought to be an appeal process for anyone, regardless of what the grievance is. But what's the role of mayor in that? Good listening, perhaps, going to taking it to the Planning and Zoning Commission or to the City Council directly. If there are some legal concerns, identifying what legal resource would most appropriately address that. But mayors don't typically have the authority to fix things behind the scenes, nor should we. We are executive branch of the government, the listening branch. If people contact me, and they often do, with problems, I do go to the city staff who are responsible for those things, and I say, if we're putting stumbling blocks in, or if we're changing the rules in the middle of the stream, or we have delayed responding to an application, let's fix that. And if we owe somebody an apology, let's issue that. If we need to improve our program, ask those folks who say we're not doing it as well as we might, how we can improve the system. But it ought to be a public process, and everybody gets to play by equitable rules.
Okay, thank you. So at the beginning of that, you're saying businesses that are polluting, that's not something we necessarily want to attract to our town. And I guess my question is, we're NSA students, we're here on Main Street. Are there any kind of businesses that you would discourage from locating to Main Street? It's a hypothetical question.
Right. I don't go out there to discourage business from coming. I mean, if someone applies, it doesn't come to my desk when they apply for coming into town. If it's a use allowed by right, they establish themselves. When I hear about a business establishing itself, I go there and welcome them. I recently welcomed the dry cleaners and the new bike shop, and the Zions has had some changes in its oversight. So, I try to extend a hand of welcome when people arrive.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and so for the next question, I'll have
right.
you begin. That is with regard to Highway 95. And right now, it was mentioned earlier in debate, in the discussion, but it currently bypasses Main Street, but runs right through town via Washington Street. So what are your thoughts on a highway bypass that would go around Moscow?
I think a bypass is a good idea for through traffic, especially heavy commercial traffic. As the Port of Lewiston has expanded, as we anticipate improvements to Highway 95 South, the Thorn Creek to Moscow section, wherever that route goes, we can anticipate we'll see more large-size commercial transport there. And those people are typically not inclined to stop in our town and frequent our businesses. When we're trying to make downtown livable and attractive for the kinds of businesses that might operate into the evening hours. If people want to live in the downtown and have a live-work arrangement, a townhouse or retail on the ground floor and apartment upstairs, it's disruptive to have big commercial transport come through there. So and I have spoken to Ray LaHood, who is now the former director of the U.S. Department of Transportation, and I'm acquainted with Anthony Fox, who is the new Secretary of Transportation, at looking at funding, because we certainly can't pay for those kinds of projects independently, but I do think it's a necessity, and they were unaware of those off-site impacts when the port expanded with the anticipation of improved Highway 95, that this thing goes right through the core of our historic downtown. Can't be walkable and bikeable and compatible with big trucks coming through.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. And Mr. Lambert, your thoughts on a Highway 95 bypass?
This was a subject that came up, Sam, 6 years ago when I was on council. And at that time, ITD told us that we didn't have enough traffic flow to really make a bypass work. I would actually, for myself, from a personal standpoint, I like the idea of a bypass, but the ITD told us at that time we didn't have the traffic flow that would necessitate that. And so that's kind of where we're at. And when you have a state highway, Highway 95, there are the states calling the shots on that. We can give our input, give what we think, do our own number research, but the numbers are going to come from the state when they do that.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to begin now the final portion, which is just your closing remarks, and we'll start with Mayor Chaney. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
That's fine. Well, I want to thank all of you for your attention today, and Ms. Russel for your good questions. Thanks very much. Moscow is kind of like the epitome of good things coming in small packages. Anybody ever get a diamond ring in a box? Did you give one of those?
I did.
Yeah. So Moscow's kind of like that. There's an abundance of life in this relatively small place, and it's diverse, and it has strongly held opinions that show up, and people will poke fun at us, but that is the glory of living in a place like Moscow, Idaho. As I've mentioned at least a couple times today, my role becomes more and more invigorating to me every day, and I'm so honored and privileged to be able to serve in this capacity. I bring good listening skills. I'm respectful of diverse and strongly held ideas. I'm an advocate for fairness. I hope that you've learned over the years of watching me at work that regardless of whether we agree on an issue, I want to know. I think we learn and make better decisions. We have a more fair process by being considerate of each other. I'm hardworking, I'm a natural networker, I'm a coalition builder, I'm a critical thinker. I think I'm reasonably articulate to a variety of audiences. I've been a vocal and visible representative of our community, not just at the local level, but at the state, regional, national, and even international levels. I'm acquainted with policymakers and funders who know who we are and care about the opportunities ahead and the things we have accomplished together. We're more apt to receive grant funding or assistance with regulatory enforcement if we are working together with those people who are in those roles. I am an informed optimist. I have a long-range strategic plan and a proven track record, and I congratulate you for being here because, as you know, many of you who are in the student population are in that demographic that is often in the single digits in voter turnout. I sent a letter to University of Idaho leaders, president and vice president, just today, encouraging them to encourage students there to vote. I applaud you for doing this today, and I hope that you will vote for me, Nancy Chaney, for mayor on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for being the moderator, and thank the panel over here for doing a wonderful job and asking the questions you did. And thank you, Nancy, for being here as well, and all of New St. Andrews collectively. Thank you for allowing us to have this chat up here so we can talk. We had candid questions, and I think we covered a lot of ground. They were wonderful questions that you guys ask of us, and I think that's terrific, and the follow-throughs were terrific. My credentials as a manager, as a facilitator, as a leader, as a developer of people, where I've mentored and trained and developed hundreds of people over the years, I bring that towards the mayorship because I think that's essential. I can talk to anybody, it doesn't matter who it is. And I've had a lot of fun out there talking to folks as I'm hitting hundreds of homes and talking to individuals out there in our community and just being vocal, saying, hi, how you doing today, and just talking to them. Do I want to be mayor? Absolutely. I've been here since 1977, and I think I can make a difference. I think I can make a change for us, and we need to have a change. We've gone through an era that we've been complacent, and there's a bunch of urgency that we do need to take a look at things, and we need to get with the program on it now, folks. I'm a numbers guy. I've got skills in that. I've got great analytical skills where I can look at things. I can look at a report and see where we're at. And sometimes, even though the Peterson report came out, it wasn't good news for us. But guess what? Sometimes we have to take medicine when we don't feel good. And that's what we need to do now to get the ship going and get us on the right direction. And that's what I'm all about. But this news article or analytic thing that Stephen Peterson put out, this isn't something new. He had two articles that he wrote in 2006 that everybody in this room should take a look at, is Moscow on a Tipping Edge and Moscow Growth. And they were analytical studies that he did in 2006 and kind of pointed it to us that we were headed this direction, and we need to change that way of thinking, and we need to move on, and I'm all about that. Would I love to be a mayor? Absolutely. I'd like to see our grandchildren, whether it be mine or your children, because you're too young to have grandchildren, to be able to have the same future that I had as a young man, and so that's what I'm looking for. And one thing I'll tell folks out there, we got quite an audience out here, everybody in this room, if you don't know who to vote for, look up an employee that works for the city, doesn't matter. Somebody out there has to know because we got hundreds of people that work for the city, and just ask them, what do you think? Would you rather work for Nancy or would you rather work for Bill? We don't need to know that, but just ask them on a one-on-one and see what they tell you. And I think that would give you a good insight because I was on council for 4 years and I worked with a number of these folks. So I'm going to have my closing remarks with that. Thank you very much for the generosity of letting us talk to all you guys. And I think you're a very bright panel up here. Thank you so much, and I look for your vote on November 5th.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Chaney and Mrs. Lambert, both. Thank you so much for your time, and city councilmen and women also, thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Atwood to close us.
Again, thank you, candidates. Delightful you could be with us and share your ideas for Moscow's future. Please, let's give them another round of applause. Thank you. And Sam and the panelists, thank you as well. Good job. Before we close, just do want to remind you to be sure to register to vote if you have not done so and plan to vote. Exercise your privilege there in participating in the election process. And so as we close, as is our tradition, I'll ask Dr. Erb to close us with a song.
Stand, sing,